first of all, as well for the invitation. Good morning to everybody. My name is Jochen Kemmer. As you've heard, I'm working for the Center for Access to Football in Europe. We're working on access and inclusion in football, so as well a fan-related topic. I will elaborate a little bit more in later what I actually do in supporting clubs with regards to the role of the Disability Access Officer. Just to maybe give you a brief introduction of myself. I've been working for 15 years approximately in disability sports as a sports instructor, as a ski instructor for blind and partially sighted people, as a football coach for differently disabled people. So it's a topic for me on which I'm really enthusiastic, passionate, and I just joined like Cafe 10 months ago to work on this project. So what we're going to talk today about is, first of all, give you a first introduction to the topic of disability in Slovakia from the figures I found. Give you some reasons, some statistics, and some stories why disability inclusion and access is an important topic. Give you like an introduction to CAFE, what we are doing actually. Give you some ideas about the role of the Disability Access Officer, what is the role about. Give you some examples of how an accessible stadium can look like, and finalize with some other works we from CAFE are doing. So I had a little bit look on figures in Slovakia, and I hope they're correct. You probably know much better than me, but what I found is like there are approximately 10% of the population in Slovakia are disabled people. This is approximately like the European average is 15% of the population. So this is quite a figure which seems to be logical for me. And if you look at the situation of disabled people in Slovakia, unfortunately the situation is not very positive. So with regards to employment, the employment rate is much lower than for non-disabled people, and there's some laws which oblige institutions to oblige disabled people, but apparently they're not very strong. As well to the topic of accessibility, from what I've found, is that public transport is hardly accessible at all. And it, like for example for wheelchair users, like they have to organize their journeys to wherever they want to go within the country long time ago, so it's not an equal treatment as a non-disabled person can just go on a train and buy its ticket on the day itself. And like apparently buses, they are totally not accessible, so often disabled people need to have to move around to have somebody who drive them around. So often it's families who take care to support them in their journeys to a job. And as well, like for example, access to education, they're often not integrated into the normal school system, so the access is very limited to education. So clearly it showed that there's still a lot of things to improve with regards to access. What I've seen at the same time, and I strongly recommend you already from the moment on, nevertheless there are a lot of NGOs in the country. There's a so-called Alliance of Organization of Disabled People in Slovakia, which has about 25 members. And why do I think it's important for you as a club? For us, they're already the experts in the area of disability, in the area of access and inclusion, so they can help you in making your stadiums accessible. And from our experience in other countries as well, it's really they're good partners. They're willing to support you for free to improve access and inclusion. From our discussion with the FA, at the moment the criterion of the DAO, the Disability Access Officer, is in the national licensing, but only at a very weak criteria. It's not an obligation, but at the same time on a European level, and I'll come back to that later, there's an obligation to appoint somebody, a disability access officer, if you want to take part in European competitions. At the same time, the UEFA infrastructure requirements, who have not only the role of the disability access officer, but as well they talk about the obligation of having accessible seats in the stadium if you want to take part in European competitions. And we are working together with the UEFA very strongly, very closely, to improve those standards so that they're even more strict in the future, so that everybody has the right to enjoy football. From the plans of the FA, first of all, one idea is to have one dedicated person working in the FA, working as a person where you as a club and fans as well, disabled fans, can go to with their questions, and coordinating kind of some training sessions and things like this in the country. Additionally, as a first step, there's the idea of doing like a stadium tour with you or the clubs together, where you get a first idea what's the current status, are our stadiums accessible, and like giving like a broad information about to fans. So those are the accessible services we have. The way from the bus station, the train station is like this, and this really is a really important and helpful tool to all disabled fans, which can make them come to football games. And we have seen in other countries that there's once you create and communicate about this topic, a lot of people will generally come who haven't had the chance before to go to the stadium. As I mentioned, like the idea is as well to create partnership with local NGOs to help you in this area. So coming now to the topic, why access is important. First of all, at the moment the situation is unfortunately that the access is a complicated topic in the way that bad access disables a lot of people. And an easy thing is like, for example, a toilet. If there's no accessible toilet in a stadium and you cannot go to a toilet for 4 or 5 hours, obviously you will not come to the game. And so just having an accessible toilet as a first thing, for example, is a big factor. We can make a big change for a disabled person. As well, what we see in a lot of countries, and that's why it's interesting to work together with a disability NGO, that you see here, you have people just standing in front of the wheelchair user seats, or here, if they stand up, people don't see anything. So poor sidelines, obstructed view can destroy my match day experience totally. And as well, like if there are stewards who do not enforce that those people leave those sites, I will not enjoy the football experience. From a personal experience, for example, I was in last year, end of October, I was with a friend who is a CSKA Moscow fan in Basel for a Champions League game, and I thought, yeah, Switzerland would be an accessible country and public transport great. I had a good feeling. We come to the stadium, we collect our tickets, and my friend is a wheelchair user, and we wanted to sit in the away sector, and we asked like the stewards, so where can we enter into the tribune, because they were always stairs only, and said like, yeah, no idea. So we asked like at least 15 stewards, and everybody said, I have no idea. And in the end, it took us more than 1 hour to find a person who knew how we could enter the stadium. We were not with the away fans, but we were in the block next to them, where there was nobody else in the block, in the sector of the stadium. From a security level, behind us there were like walls which could move away, but if there would have been an emergency, I mean, without the help of other people, it was impossible to put those walls away. So it was really a not that perfect situation. And I mean, obviously if you have this type of experience, you don't enjoy the football game. But at the same time, if you have a good experience, this can make really the day, and as well can have an impact on the life of a disabled person. So it's important that we take away those barriers. I just want to read out a story to you, which shows as well what impact a bad access can have. Vicky Cunningham, she's a very fan who's going like to her team, a second division team in England, and she's visiting every game, home and away. So she's an experienced football game. She has seen a little bit everything, and she's going with her 4 sons to every game. And I just want to tell you a little bit about her story. So she said, "My son used a power chair. At the last home match, we were completely blocked from the entering stadium by a group of stewards, photographers and safety officers, who ignored us as we tried to get past. It is as if we weren't even there, and just they carried on their conversations. My son went to the toilet at halftime, and when we came back, there were stewards stood in space talking with fans, meaning that he couldn't get back in and the rest of the walkway was blocked off. It's getting to the stage where I hate going because of the attitude of people. I understand the facilities in the stadiums are not great, but there's no excuse for a poor attitude. They are selfish and unconcerned, and it feels like they only do the job for a free ticket. I hate that my other 3 sons have to sit away from us. I'm sick of having to fight our way into a tiny toilet with no room, and sick of always knocking the bins off the wall to get it because the corridor is too narrow. The accessible toilets are appalling. I'm sick of getting wet during the game, and I'm sick of pitch adverts blocking our view. Me and my sons love watching, but every time we enter the stadium it feels like we're traveling 30 years back. I will never stop fighting for my son because he shouldn't have to settle for the second best just because he uses a wheelchair. I've been a season ticket holder for 35 years. It is just not acceptable how we are expected to just cope. I will fight for his rights while he is still alive, and don't forget we are paying season ticket holder, just like everybody else." A sad story, a true story which is happening every day, and the message I want to take out for you mostly is, I mean, of course there's an infrastructure part, always in excess as well, but just changing the mindset, doing a training with the stewards, and just being friendly and respectful as to every spectator in the stadium can have a big impact on their stadium experience. So there's always the excuse of infrastructure and financials, but there's no excuse for behavior, and that's the first thing what in my opinion we can tackle as a football club. At the same time as well, showing some of the great stories if you provide a positive experience. Just like a fan from Israel who traveled to a match and watching a game in Real Madrid, and her wife, his wife saying, "I haven't seen him so happy in weeks. The trip wouldn't have been the same if he would have missed the match." Or a very active fan from Lechia Gdansk, "Quite simply, I just love football." Or about the introduction of audio descriptive commentary in Ukraine, Eugen Sweat says, "For Ukraine, the development of audio descriptive commentary is just fantastic. Prior to UEFA Euro 2012, it was very rarely provided and tended just to consist of somebody telling listeners what was happening in very little detail. It was in the Ukrainian Cup final match on the 6th of May that I heard the audio descriptive commentary for the first time. And the difference was staggering. There was absolutely no comparison." Once again, the message what I want to share with you is really you can have a positive impact on the football experience of many disabled fans, and this can have really a change in their lives. So this was kind of like the emotional introduction, and then I want to give you some other reasons why access and inclusion is an important topic. First of all, because before I mention any of those statistics there, it's a human right. It has been decided in 1948 by the UN Convention, the right of equal treatment, and has been adopted by nearly all states in the world to adopt this into their local constitution. So it's a equal right it's a human right. So this is as well what you have to your club if you have to discuss about financials or whatever. We are obliged to do it, so there's no excuse for not doing it. Secondly, clearly, showing that there's the need for it. Statistics from the European Disability Forum say that at least 40% of the population require good access at any time. And this means, we've heard like approximately 50% of the population are disabled, but as well you have like a society is getting older and older, so walking, like having a long walk to the game is complicated. A pregnant woman, somebody who has a temporary injury, it concerns everybody in the society. And yeah, with 1 billion people in the world who are disabled, 15% of the population, and like as well, if you just from a European level, according to UEFA, for example, there are 500,000 active disabled football fans in Europe, and if you say in Europe there are approximately 100 million disabled people, so if you only say that they're like 20% of those people are football fans, would mean 20 million potential disabled football fans in Europe. So the gap between the 500,000 active disabled football fans and 20 million, there's still a lot of new customers to win for us as a football club. And experience has clearly shown that it's possible to gain them as new fans. You see as well that at the moment the inclusion hasn't entirely happened yet. 50% of disabled people have never attended a public sporting event, and as well 40% of disabled people have never traveled abroad. Both of the things, going to a sports event and traveling, is very common in our society, so there's definitely still a big gap which we have to overcome. At the same time, the wish, the need, the willingness to go to a football game for disabled fans is there. In end of 2006, we started a survey with disabled fans all around Europe, and they said that going to a football game is a very important topic, and that they want to go to a football game. As well, there was a study by Forbes 2 years ago, which said that 97% of the population, independent whether disabled or non-disabled in Europe, said that there should be done more for the inclusion of disabled people in Europe. And then coming to the financial point of view, we mentioned like the aging society, so we have to take care as well of fans getting older and older and older, and saying like we have to attract different type of crowds as well to our stadium, to fill our stadiums. So accessible stadiums makes it possible to still keep the fans, which are getting older and older and older, and as well win a lot of new disabled fans, but as well fans who are not naturally disabled, but who just need a good access. And I think it's our role in football. We have a particular role in football as one of the biggest sports, or the biggest sports in the world, that we can do and change. And I know, and you've heard a little bit like the legal situation is maybe not necessarily yet that strong in Slovakia, but in football we have the power as well to do a change. And if we start improving access and inclusion in football, we can change as well something in the society. So coming now to Cafe, what are we doing? We were founded in 2009 by this young lady, Joyce Cook. Maybe to give you a story as well about Joyce Cook. Joyce Cook, she was a very successful business woman for many years, and suddenly she became a wheelchair user, and she couldn't really cope with that new situation. And for nearly 2 years, she didn't leave her home. She only left her home for going to the doctor. But she felt like, as a wheelchair user, I'm not accepted in society. I cannot do anything anymore. And yeah, she was really depressed. Her partner, though, convinced her to, after a long time, to go to football games because she was an avid football supporter. So after a long time, she went they went to a football game together. And this had really a positive impact on her life. She saw that in football everybody is equal, and that she could still enjoy football as everybody else in the stadium. And at the same time, she saw as well the potential. She saw that there were a lot of disabled people in the stadiums, and at the same time, she saw that the conditions were not necessarily the best. So she decided to set up an organization which is called Level Playing Field in England, which is basically doing what CAFE is doing, just on a UK basis. And UEFA saw her work, and they were pretty impressed by the work she was doing. And then they awarded her with the UEFA Monaco Award. And with the help of the UEFA Monaco Prize, CAFE was established in 2009 with the idea of having a European organization improving access and inclusion. And since that, the relationship with the UEFA has developed and has been strengthened further and further. We're working on the finals for Euro, for Champions League, for Euroleague, Super Cup, and we're in daily contact with UEFA on the regulations. So the partnership has really developed strongly in the last years, and still we have the same goals as in the beginning. Ideas to work to a more inclusive and accessible game by using the unique power of football, and at the same time promoting the employment of disabled people in football. So, for example, with regards to this, and that might be interesting for you as well. First of all, we have some guidelines of how to create some inclusive employment policies and some accessible workplaces. And we just started a partnership with a so-called Football for All Leadership program, which is an inclusive study program which starts this year in October, and the application has just started. So basically disabled people can apply for a study program which helps them on their way to get into work into football. And yeah, as I said, like, it's a totally inclusive study program. So what are we exactly doing? We're working with all the stakeholders in football, clubs and FAs, like doing trainings like today about the role of the disability officer, trainings on disability inclusion and etiquette. We work together with disabled fans, doing surveys with them to understand better their needs, their wishes. UEFA mentioned with FIFA. We work on the FIFA World Cup as well, to make stadium access appraisals for all the stadiums on the World Cup. We work together with stadium owners and architects. So I've heard like there are a couple of new stadium projects in Slovakia. So please feel free to contact us as well, and we can give you advice on what can be changed in the stadium to make it better accessible. We work together with researchers and academics to find out about the current situation, how's inclusion in Europe, what are the situation of disabled football fans from an access point of view. And yeah, I mentioned already the collaboration with UEFA and with all their CSR partners. And some of the things which are as well very, very important for you, and I really recommend you to read on our website, and we will send you after the workshop. We have a very clear and precise guidance document of how to make a stadium accessible. This starts like, what is if you have ramps, what is the inclination of the ramps, how many wheelchair user spaces should be there, how should they be built, how can an accessible toilet be. So really clear guidelines. At the same time, we do stadium access appraisals, and our wish is as well to train partners in each country to do those access appraisals for us. We work on what we call audio descriptive commentary program, which is like a service for blind and partially sighted people, and we train as well within other countries commentators. And we have just launched like a bit more than months ago an expert forum. So if you have any technical questions, please feel free to contact us as well, and we can bring you in contact with our experts who are happy to help. We have guidance documents on how to create a disabled supporters association. And why is a disabled supporters association important? to raise the voice of disabled supporters and preventing that you just have like two fans telling you we want this, and this is important, that you here really listen to a huge amount of disabled fans and have a good way of communication with them. I mentioned the work we do on accessible and inclusive employment policies in workplaces. Besides of this, we're promoting the topic of access and inclusion all over Europe. So we have various events on which we have been in the past months. So, for example, the UEFA EU Stadium and Security Conference, where we've spoken about the importance and of accessible toilets for football game I mentioned before. We've been on the European Football for Development Network Conference, where we've spoken about how to integrate the aspect of the disability access officer into the corporate social responsibility activities of football clubs. We've spoken on the Council of Europe Convention on safety and security, about correct stewarding with regards to disabled people, and as well about the topic of how to integrate the disabled fans in evacuation procedures. We're working on the UEFA on the Champions Festival for the EuroLeague and Champions League Festival, and on the UEFA Equal Game campaign. I will get back to that later. And I already invite you now. Every 3 years we have what we call a cafe conference, which is basically a networking event for experts in the area of access and inclusion within football. It might take place not too far away from here, but it's not yet sure. But yeah, the idea is to share the best practice on this event and what can be done to improve access and inclusion in football. So coming now to the role of the Disability Access Officer. So how did this role come up, and how did this end up in the UEFA financial fair play regulations, club licensing and financial fair play regulations? Basically, as I said, like we've been working with UEFA since 2009 on the finals, and the understanding was it's great to work on the finals to make a good example on how a stadium can be made accessible, but it's not enough. We have to help and work together with all clubs really to make it not only for the big events, but make access and inclusion a topic for every club. So the decision was to have in each club a disability access officer who's a person who takes care of this matter, who promotes access and inclusion within the club. So now every club who has to who wants to play European competition has to have appointed a DAO. And as I said, like we want to support you, the clubs, the FAs, through trainings. And we, for example, had a handbook which we launched just end of last year. And I will try to sum up today like the major points of this handbook. So who's the DAO? What are kind of his duties or her duties? First of all, it's supporting and advising a club on all disability-related matters. And this can be accessible ticketing, this can be what are the best NGOs with whom we can work together, how can we communicate about the topic of access and inclusion, what are the current regulations, the building regulations. So somebody who's wishing to inform him or herself on this topic and then provides this information to the club and works together with the colleagues in the club. And the idea is obviously to improve access and inclusion for fans, but as well for employees, for volunteers, not only on one moment but on a year-on-year basis. And this is for me a first point where you can start. I mean, I will mention a lot of things, and this is all like the dream, and I understand that. I mean, your clubs, you don't have 500 employees, so it's difficult to have so many tasks at the moment. But what can always be done is like have a person who's already the first contact for disabled fans. our experience is if you have a person who's like communicated to fans on the website in the stadium program, people will start calling with questions. And once you have these questions coming up, then you can as well communicate within the club either, yeah, we had, I don't know, 20, 50, whatever, these are people calling us this month or this year, and so that the need for it. Then the communication internally is much more easy. And as well you find out what are really the needs. And yeah, this person, the DO, can be available on the match day as well to answer questions of the fans. Promoting internally the topic of access inclusion and externally. Internally, it's not always an easy task, because it's maybe not often the first priority. So it's good if the DO is a person who's passionate about the topic, and he has to get back to the senior management to remind of the topic again and again and again every couple of months, so that it stays on the agenda. Externally, and that's as well we've heard before on the topic of marketing. Like in our generations, like football is often related, if you talk about fans, often related to violence. So it's often like you hear negative stories. And with a topic like access and inclusion, you can easily create positive stories. So bring your club into a positive light. And therefore it's important as well to work with the communications department to how can we use those stories into positive stories, and then making some positive news on our club. As I said, like it's important to have an understanding of what are the current legislations and best practices. And here I mentioned the Disability Access Officer Handbook, the Access for All Handbook. So this is already like really important documents. Understanding the needs of the clubs, of the fans. So what are really their priorities, do some surveys with them, and develop an access strategy. This means, for example, sometimes you forget like easy things. For example, maintenance. If you have audio descriptive committee, how often do I have to change the battery, that you don't find yourself after 5 games that the technical equipment cannot be used anymore because the battery is empty. Or this can as well be only like if they're accessible toilets and somebody is taking care of changing the toilet paper. It sounds strange, but yeah, you have to think about this and not just only doing activities at once. I've spoken already about the communication strategy, and what as well is good if the disability access officer on long run informs internally within the club about the importance of the topic by doing some trainings how to steward, for example. What is for example, like a wheelchair user, how does a security check with a wheelchair user look like? What is the legislation? Is a person allowed to bring medicaments or a cane for a partially sighted or blind person? That people are just aware of those kind of topics. And as well, like on the equal ticketing policy, for example, that various ways of ordering tickets by phone, by internet, so that everybody has a possibility to buy a ticket. At the same time, that ticketing policies, we generally say that disabled people shall pay the same price as everybody else for a stadium. At the same time, we say, like, if at the moment this is not the case, or the service you provide to disabled fans is different, bad view, poor sidelines, whatever, then obviously the price can be different. And if you change from a low price or non-existing price to like a equal price, then you should like do this process of adaptation of the price in a gradual way. So I mentioned, and the plan of the FA is as well having those kind of help sheets where you inform fans about the access situation in club, and this is like really for the planning process of the fans is really important. So it would be great if you could work on that, and that doesn't cost a lot of effort. The DAO can be the contact person on a match day. You can support your fans on the creation of a disabled supporters group, and as well think of integrating disabled fans into your non-match events. For example, if you have like a museum at your stadium, if you have like a season opening, a Christmas party, things like this, that you make those events as well accessible. So to sum up again, the DAO is kind of in the middle of all the works all around access and inclusion, working together with the Disabled Supporters Association, with the fans, both home and away fans. So should as well inform the away clubs about the access situation within the stadium, in touch with the senior management, and important to have the support of the senior management, informing all the other departments, ticketing, PR, but as well the stewards about access and inclusion, working closely together with them. And in the future, if there will be a national DAO coordinator to work together and work as well with Cafe to first of all share your stories and get to us with as well with your questions. So to sum it up again, I know once again it's a wish list, so don't be afraid. First of all, from the qualities I think a person should have to work as a DAO is just like being passionate, motivated for this topic. For me, this is the most important criteria, and the rest is good. But yeah, this is just a dream list. But as you have to communicate with all like the different stakeholders within the club, obviously it's good if you can communicate, if you can convince the senior management to invest as well into the topic. Important as well that you have a feeling, good understanding of the needs of disabled fans. So if you have maybe previous experience, previous contact with disabled fans, that surely helps. And if you can just relate to their needs. Important as well, and one of the major criteria for me as well, that you have a pan-disability approach. It's often the case that we only think of wheelchair users, but in fact wheelchair users are only 10% of the disabled persons. So they're, for example, blind, partially sighted, who are 15% of the population, and all very deaf fans would more than 15% of the population. So you have to think about all those differently disabled persons as well. And we did a lot of interviews with existing disability access officers in other countries, and their like major tips were like, first, listen, means do some surveys with your fans, understand your needs. Then secondly, get to know your stadium. So where are the accessible toilets? Where is an entrance? Where is maybe an elevator? Where can they buy food? Are there any lowered counters where they can buy food? What's the evacuation plan? So just have if you get a question from a disabled fan, that you can answer on that type of question. Then analyze what are the priorities, and based on this analyze, do the changes. At the same time, this sounds like as if you have to plan like 20 years for something. That's definitely not the case. Sometimes just like an easy thing which can be done, like in winter, it's cold, and a person who cannot just stand up might be freezing. So if you can just maybe offer, for example, a blanket to a wheelchair user, that can already make a big change, and it costs like €5 per blanket. So it's not a difficult investment. Then, and as well, this is once again a topic which is complicated. Sometimes the idea is, you don't want to communicate about things, but it's important to communicate the good things you are doing, to make people come to your stadiums. Give an example of Poland, with whom we started working for the Euro 2012. We started working with them in 2011, and they said we don't have any disabled people in our country. So we started working with after the Euro as well, and in 2015 they had on a match, they had a special event, and they had more than 1,000 disabled fans on a match day. So apparently there were some disabled fans. So it's important to communicate, and then you can bring those disabled fans as well to the stadium. And if you're now afraid, such a big responsibility, I think the idea is not that DAO is working alone at the topic. He's like the main point of contact maybe, but it's important that he or she works together with all other different departments, and important as well that there's a commitment of the club that we want to work on this topic. So everybody is really responsible to work on this. So now I want to give you some examples of what can be done, some more complicated and some easier things which can be done to make a stadium accessible. So for example, this from Arsenal, they just had a new platform for wheelchair users, which was lifted up, so they have good sidelines. Same time, you see here a good practice example, because they have the spaces for the companions next to the wheelchair users, and this is what we recommend as a best practice. Unfortunately, often it's still the case that they are behind or in front, but from a communication point of view between the persons, it's not the best solution. And here you see as well that audio descriptive commentary service is provided, so people can rent the listening devices on a match day and give them back after the match. I mentioned about accessible toilets. There's a website as well which explains like how an accessible toilet shall be constructed, and these are like things that there are some rails where you can hand yourself on, that there's a possibility to call an emergency, that the sink can be lowered as well, but there's very clear guidelines on that. And as well, you see like it's important to have a good signage with a big color contrast and relatively big signage so that everybody can read it. Here as well, good idea, for example, there's some storage space for rolling walkers next to the tribune, so people who have walking aids, they can go nearly to the seats, and then the last meters they walk without their walking aid, but they can store them next to it. In other stadiums as well, there's possibility to rent a wheelchair, for example, at the bus station, and then you get transported to the stadium, and then after the game you get retransported back, but a couple of meters there you can walk to the seat. Here as well you see a lowered counter to buy some food and refreshments. I mean, everybody wants to be independent, so you don't want to rely on somebody, and you don't want to look up like this if you want to order your food. So think about those things as well to make everybody welcome. I mentioned like here, for example, Manchester City, they have a shuttle service from both from the parking spaces and from the train station to the stadium, and they have like, for example, at the place where the ticketing counters, they have an induction loop so that hard of hearing people can order their tickets as well individually and without help. Another story is like sensory rooms who become more and more popular, which are basically a possibility to integrate autistic people more to the world of football. There are dimmed lights, special lighting, so the noise of the stadium is not that big. An experience has shown once people have started going to the football stadium, afterwards they get used more to the environment of the stadium, then they can go into the normal seating areas. So it's a good way as well to have as well an accessible stadium for autistic people. RB Leipzig in Germany, for example, they have a fan club of deaf people of more than 400 people. And they have a service like of a sign language interpreter on the giant screen. And as well, they have a dedicated block in the stadium for nearly 100 people, so that as well deaf and hard of hearing people can, for example, be informed about security information, but as well he communicates, for example, what are the fans singing in the stadium. I mentioned like the importance of having stewards who are trained. How to do a security check, bringing in what is allowed to bring into the stadium, or as well the blankets, which can make a big change to the match day experience. And those were kind of a little bit, some of them were more advanced solution. Now I'm coming a little bit to the less advanced solution. Barcelona, for example, I don't know if somebody of you has been at the stadium, but it's very old stadium, so it's not necessarily the easiest stadium in terms of accessibility, but they've done some great efforts. For example, they built new ramps next to the stairs, like all around the stadium. And what they found out, they made statistics of how many people use the stairs and how many people use the ramps, independent from disabled or non-disabled. And they found out that more than 80% of the people use the ramps because they find it more comfortable to walk than stairs. So it's as well, it's not only for disabled people, but it's a service to all your fans, which can really change the way to the stadium. At the same time, like they have in the museum, they have like, for example, screens which you can touch them at the top and at the bottom. So it might be for a wheelchair user, but might as well be for kids, so that they can use the screens as well. And as well, a good solution, which is a little bit cheaper than installing like an elevator in a stadium, is just like they have like a lift, which is like some people have at home to go up a stair. For example, in Rome, they have it on the media tribune, but it can be installed in various areas of the stadium, obviously. And then some other ideas of so this is Rome as well, and basically the accessible parking is just here around the corner, and then so for example wheelchair users, they come out here, and then they have to go through like roads over cobblestone and uneven surface, and people with limited mobility, it's really a trip hazard. So important to think as well about those things and having a flat ground. Or for example, in the toilets, like there's a type of door lock which is, some people they cannot turn the lock, so there are different ways as well of locking the doors, which can be adapted with a grab rail, for example. So two not so good examples, but here a really great example on a point of signage. You have like really big signage indicating the blocks and with a strong color contrast. 8% of the male population are colorblind. So it's really important to think as well about colorblind people in your signage, because if not, people will not be able to see the indications. So it's important to have strong contrast in your signage. Giving you some examples here. So here you have an example from Estonia, for example, on the signage, and here you have a strong background. So you see a normal color vision and a colorblind simulation. That's a really good example of how signage can be made in a stadium. Then as well on staircase for blind and partially sighted people, there's no color contrasting. And here a good example, you have the contrast between the yellow and the gray on the step nosings, and as well in the beginning you have like there could be like tactile pavement on the bottom to indicate the moment when it gets down or when it gets up. As well, like here's some examples, gray on gray, no contrast, so a blind or partially sighted person or colorblind person will struggle to see this pillar. So important to have as well some contrast. And here, for example, you see a good example. You have the blue and the gray, big color contrast, and even an indication of the pillar through this line in the middle of the pillar. And here, it's very difficult to see the indication of the signage. Another example, here, for example, you have the firefighting equipment, and there's the background. There's not a good background between the firefighting equipment and the background, and here even worse, the color contrast. I'm not sure whether you can see anything at all, but like the red device here on the red background, you cannot see. So 8% of the male population cannot see the difference already. So it's better to have if you have firefighting equipment, emergency equipment, that you have it on a different colored background. So just wanted to give you some examples. Signage, if you say we cannot change anything, it's expensive, blah blah, signage is cheap and it makes a big difference to a fan. So that's maybe one of the first things you can think of your club in having a good signage to improve the way to the stadium and the match day experience. So what else are we doing? How can we support you as a club? As I mentioned, like we do those trainings like today. We do trainings on disability inclusion and etiquette. We do training on the topic of audio descriptive commentary. We created a group of disability access officers in Europe where people share their stories, they ask their questions. So I'll cordially invite you to join this group, and we will send you later on like the how you can find this group. As well, we're working with UEFA on creating, and I hope we will launch it in mid-May, first newsletter, DAO newsletter, where we share as well stories of DAOs, of clubs, what are their activities, what are their struggles, and what can be done to improve access and inclusion within the club. Next year we will have the first European meeting between DAOs organized by UEFA and us as an exchange. But at the same time, if you want to see what a club is doing abroad, please feel free to contact me, and I can get you in touch with a club abroad who's maybe you're already working on the topic for a longer time. To do a shadow visit to see like really what a DSO is doing. And we've started with those exchange meetings already this year in February on Champions League and EuroLeague matches. That basically the visiting club, the DAO, goes to or sees what the DAO of the home club is doing. They exchange their practices. On another level, from cafe point of view, we do trainings all over Europe. And we do shadow visits to, we're working on the topic of disability access office as well, not such a long time, so it's important for me to learn from you as well. And I had the chance to shadow DAOs so far in Germany, England, Spain, to see what are the duties on a match day, what are the best facilities, what are the best services which can be provided. So I'll be really grateful if you do already something in this area, if you share your stories and share as well your doubts, in which way we can support you so that we can improve as well. Other activities what I want to mention, which will soon be available. We turned a video in December with Manchester City about the role of a disability access officer and the matchday experience of a disabled fan. So I hope the final version should be released in the next weeks. And then we share that as well on our website, so it gives you a good idea and good story as well, where you can create some huge media interest. Just want to, maybe not, yeah, if you have, yeah. If you don't know what audio descriptive commentary means, I just want to give you one example from a video which UEFA filmed. So I hope this gave you a good impression of how detailed audio descriptive commentary can be, really describing not only like in a normal radio commentary what's happening on the pitch, but as well the colors, what are the fans doing, thank you, what clothing are they wearing, what's happening in the air. I mean, things which make all part of the stadium atmosphere. And yeah, it's a great tool, and we in the countries where we've been working on this topic, we've always had a good interest, and a lot of people came to the games once the clubs started providing this service. And it's really like, as a one of our consultants who's a blind person said, for example, she said before, with normal radio commentary, matches were like watching a black and white movie. Now I see a rainbow. So it's a really big change to the match day experience. And what else do we do? Like on an awareness point of view, we just had in March, for example, the what we call the Cafe Week of Action, which is basically a week to celebrate all clubs' activities on access and inclusion. But if I say clubs, this can be fan clubs, this can be an individual person who's doing some great efforts to improve access and inclusion, and just presenting a positive story. And just want to give you 3 examples of what has been happening. Past year, for example, Barcelona, they took part in the event, and they had like kids as player escorts running with the stars into the stadium, holding the Cafe Week of Action banner. They had posters and announcements all around the stadium. The stadium speaker spoke about this event. This year they had it during the match against Atletico Madrid, and they had all the perimeter advertising before the match and at halftime with the Cafe Week of Action banner. So really great visibility for us in this tool. I mentioned the event which was created in 2015 in Poland, which brought more than 1,000 disabled spectators to an event which was part of the Week of Action. And for example, Vera Bremen in Germany, they created as part of the Week of Action what they call an inclusion day. So basically they started hiring a lot of disabled people to work as a pitch maintenance on the refreshment kiosks, that as well player escort disabled people. They had the stadium speaker who was sharing his task with a disabled person on a match day. So really positive changes which have been communicated. And we started in 2012 with 2 countries. This year we had 27 countries participating. So I hope next year we'll have a couple of you joining as well. And two other more awareness campaigns. First of all, share your sidelines. Basically, the idea of this campaign is that disabled fans share their pictures on a match day with us. How's their sideline? A selfie and like just showing their sideline. This can be good and bad examples. And just have a slogan as well. Why football is one sentence. Why football is important for them. And we want to promote really like that everybody is able to participate in the match day. At the same time, Equal Game from UEFA, which was launched as a follow-up from the Say No to Racism campaign last year in September. Really great campaign as well. They created a website, and basically on the website they present stories on the topic of access and inclusion. So for example, they have like that everybody is able to enjoy football in a different way. They have, for example, walking football presented there, like a story from a 65-year-old person who's still playing football in walking football. They have a story of a referee who they have a story of big stars, but they have the stories of people like you and me who just enjoy football. They have stories of disabled fans, and it's a really big positive media story that already since September more than 1 billion hits on the website. So it shows that you can, with those stories, create an interest in the media. So I can invite you as well to share your stories, which you have already. We select every month a couple of stories which we think they are good, and we present them to the UEFA. And then basically, it doesn't mean you have to have something filmed. Just you have a good story in mind, and then UEFA comes and will film this story for you. And obviously, this has a positive media impact for you. And coming back to one topic of the beginning, the topic of the Disabled Supporters Association. Basically, we started with this topic, and there have been more than 100 disabled supporters associations outside of England and 70 in the UK. There are 7 national disabled supporters associations, and we wish to promote this creation of further DSAs in the future. We created a information pack about this topic end of last year. We are promoting their activities. We launched a Facebook group as well to give the possibility to exchange on this topic. And as I said, like the idea is really to raise the voice of disabled fans, to get an understanding of their needs, and as well then internally within the club to be able to communicate there's a real interest. We have a need to do changes as well in the stadium. So to sum up, I just want to remind again, like we are in a unique position in football, that we have the chance to change the life of many people. And so I can hope to invite you again to continue or start working on this topic and do some positive things. Thank you, and open for your questions.
OK, ďakujeme. Takže nejaké otázky, ak niekto prípadne má, sa niečo spýta. Ja sa chcem spýtať, že čo podľa vás najlepším spôsobom zmení prístup klubov všeobecne k handicapovaným fanúšikom. Či je to vzdelávanie, či sú to nejaké projekty, alebo možno nejaké tvrdé nariadenia, regule zo strany ligy alebo zväzu. Že čo by bol najlepší recept na to, aby sa zlepšila práca klubov v tejto oblasti?
Clearly education. For me, I don't know how many of you knew the statistics, for example, on disabled person. Very few people know. Very few people know about this. So for me, this is the crucial point. And it's more about convincing people that it's the right thing to do. Obligations is a good thing. and we work with UEFA on this, and I mean we hope as well that the FAs work further on this topic. But I think the most important topic is informing people, educating why it's important and what positive changes this can have.
OK, one more question. Ešte jedna otázka, že aký je podľa vás nejaký vývoj alebo trend do budúcna? S tým, že tak ako ste povedali, že veľa z nás tu asi nevedelo tej štatistiky, že 10-15% ľudí má nejaký handicap, že či do budúcna je skôr šanca, že sa bude zvyšovať tento počet, alebo že budú nejaké možno iné handicapy, alebo že aký je ten vývoj do budúcna, že či to číslo bude narastať, alebo klesať, alebo ako to vidíte?
I mean, our society is aging, so clearly the figures will increase in the upcoming decades.
Okay, it's not a question, it's just a thank you. I was at the Level Playing Field conference at Anfield at Liverpool last month, and it was attended by 30 or 40 groups. And what you're doing here is fantastic. I just thank you for it.
OK, ešte nejaké otázky? Náhodou niekto? Dobre, thank you very much. Ďakujeme.
Thank you very much. And I just want to remind you, I know like it's a new topic for a lot of you, so I hope you've noted down or note down my contact details. So really I invite you, if you have questions in the future, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.